Okay, we will go ahead and get started. So I wanted to thank the folks who are here. I know we will probably have some more folks stream in. Yeah, there's someone. And I'll let them in as they come in. We had a little bit of a break between, March, the spring break, and then over February was when that tremendous storm hit South Texas. And so it's nice to see everyone back. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our colegas over at Project Males and for them to be able to talk about the incredible work that their organization has been able to do. If you haven't heard of them, the work that Project Males does in terms of mentoring and supporting the success of men of color is essential to the work that we do at Catch the Next. And so it is my absolute pleasure to be able to welcome Dr. Emma Campos, Rodrigo Aguayo, and Christopher Estrella Ramirez. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you so much for inviting us. We welcome the opportunity to tell our story. And as I was mentioning to you before we came on live, that we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary of Project Males, hence the title, Project Males, a Decade of Empowering Boys and Young Men of Color in Our Schools. And it is amazing that here we are 10 years later. I joined Project Males about 6 years ago as director, and I oversee 3 projects, and you're going to hear a little bit about those initiatives. But joining me is Rodrigo Aguayo, who runs our Project Males mentoring program. Rodrigo, you want to give a wave? And Christopher Estrella, who is one of our graduate coordinators, one of our grad students, and he's going to be earning his master's here in the next month or so. So he's going to be walking the stage. So we're going to be celebrating his accomplishments. And this is what we do at Project Males, right? It's about supporting our young men of color, whether we're talking about middle, high school young men, or our college students or mentors, undergrads or graduate students, and on through the other end at earning PhDs, right? And so that's really what we're about. And so we're going to get started. And I want to first, what we typically do in these presentations is we do a land acknowledgement. And so we want to recognize, of course, the indigenous communities that have come before us. We'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on indigenous land. We'd like to acknowledge and pay respects to the Carrizo, Comecrudo, Coaljitecan, Cado, Tonkawa, Comanche, Lipan, Apache, Alabama, Cushata, Kickapoo, Tiwa, Pueblo, and all the American Indian and indigenous peoples and communities who have been or have been part of these lands and territories in Texas, here on Turtle Island. So thank you for allowing us to share that. We do want to recognize our indigenous communities who come before us. Moving on to our next slide. We don't do this work alone. You see in front of you, of course, myself as a director, Rod, one of our coordinators. We have a number of other coordinators. We have graduate student coordinators. We have undergrads. Other critical partners we refer to as thought partners. And the reason that we refer to them as thought partners is because they are part of the conversation in addressing these issues on boys and men of color. And here we have listed a number of our thought partners who also happen to be funders, right? Supporters of the work that we do. And that's really how we do the work here at Project Males. We do it through the support of private foundations. One of our foundations that have supported us from the very beginning. Greater Texas Foundation has been with us from the very beginning. Kresge Foundation came on board about 3-4 years ago. We were fortunate enough to get a renewed a grant from them. Of course, many of you recognize Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. They've been a supporter from the very beginning. We have federal grants that we've been able to secure over the years. OJJDP, Office of Juvenile Justice Detention Prevention, is one of those federal grants. And then these other folks are, of course, longtime partners of ours. Austin Independent School District, where we serve our young men that I mentioned earlier, middle and high school young men. Texas Can, Del Valley, ISD has been one of our partners. East Austin College Prep. And we do this work at UT. UT is, of course, a big place, as you can imagine, a very large institution. And we do it within the space of the Division of Diversity Community Engagement. We're one of 60 programs that are housed in DDCE. And that was originally founded about 12 years ago under the leadership of Dr. Gregory Vincent, and then Dr. Moore assumed the helm, and then we just the president has just appointed a new VP to lead that division, and her name is Dr. Latoya Smith. So we're fortunate to be able to operate in a space like the division, which houses programs having to do with diversity, equity, inclusion. And so we're one of those 60 programs, and happy to be part of that. And of course, last but not least, I got to mention Texas A&M, because they've been a part of it from the very beginning. Of course, many of you know, and I'll mention him in a moment, Dr. Luis Panjuan, who is at A&M, and they've been a key partner from the very beginning. So moving on to the next slide, right, if I can. Again, we don't do this work alone. I mentioned our esteemed founders, Dr. Victor Saenz on the left at the bottom, and Dr. Luis Panjuan. They founded Project Mills about 10 years ago. And many of you may be familiar with that signature publication that was supported by AHI, American Association of Hispanics in Higher Ed, and they supported publication of their paper called The Vanishing Latino Male in Higher Ed, and they were both co-authors. And that's really where it all started, with that publication. One publication, and that was the beginnings of our research institute. And then, of course, we've grown it with other initiatives we'll speak about here in a bit. And then on the right, you'll see some of the leadership team assembled here. Rodrigo on the left, Jace Kujia, one of our doctoral students, Dr. Jorge Bermicki. I mentioned before that we're about also producing PhD, doctoral faculty, and Dr. Bermicki is a recent graduate. He's been also leading our research institute. Of course, I'm in the middle, Dr. Saenz, Dr. Panjuan. Rico Gonzalez, who is not able to join us, is our coordinator for our consortia. And then Chris, who's with us, is one of our graduate coordinators. And then the picture at the top in front of the tower is many of our undergraduate students who are mentors and who support the work that we do at the mentoring program. And Rod and Chris will be speaking, going to take a deep dive into that particular program. That's going to be the program that we probably will be highlighting in their presentation. So I mentioned, of course, that we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary, and what you see in front of you is a timeline that we created that captures kind of the highlights of our program over the last 10 years. And we kind of arranged it along the lines of highlights within the Research Institute, highlights with our consortia, which was founded in 2013, and then our Project Mills mentoring program. And so let me see if I can drop a link there for you so you can access that. And I invite you to visit our Project Mills website, and also visit, let me see if I drop that in the chat. There we go. So I just dropped that link in the chat, and you can actually visit the 10-year timeline. And, we've tried to capture most of those highlights. We may have left a gap here and there, but again, this tells you a little bit about the story, where it began, where we've arrived here 10 years later, and where we propose to go. And we've also, besides creating this timeline, we've got a whole website created to honor and commemorate this 10-year anniversary. In addition to the timeline, you're going to find other information. We have an honorary committee that we assemble, 50-member honorary committee. You'll see those members that make up that honorary committee. And those are key folks, founders, along with Dr. Saenz and Dr. Panjuan, William Sarata from El Paso Community College, Dr. Lucelma Canales, a number of other folks, Dr. Gregory Vincent, of course, he was also a key player. I mentioned him earlier. And incubated, was part of the incubation process of Project Mills at EDCE. And so you'll see information about that 50-member committee. And then also we've used this opportunity to fundraise as well. And so we created an excellence fund with the support of the UT Development Office. And along with those foundation monies and federal grants and those service agreements I mentioned, and consortium membership, we've also established an excellence fund to help us do this work, right? And so please visit that link I shared. moving along. All right, so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to my esteemed colegas, Dr. Rodrigo Guaro and Chris Estrella, and we're going to give you a little bit of a taste of what it's like in our mentoring program, because this is going to be a kind of a teaser. And I've got a couple more slides I want to share about data and about stories and narratives and the framing of our work. And then I'm going to hand it over to them to talk about the mentoring program. But we want to just give you kind of a little bit of a taste of what that looks like in our mentoring program inside. And this is how we center students in this space when we deliver our mentoring. And so I'm going to hand it over to Rod and let him and Chris kind of on this.
Thank you, Dr. Campos, and good afternoon, everyone. How many of y'all have heard of Happy News before? If I can see any activity on your chat or raise your hand, I see you, Mona. But for us, Happy News, I see you, Ann. For us, Happy News is one of the things that we incorporate in pretty much all of our meetings. It's a way for us to check in. It's a way for us to see how our staff is doing, how our students are doing. And for you, we want to see how y'all are doing as well. It's a little check-in. We know that it's Thursday. It's Thursday at 3 p.m. Your batteries might be running on the 75, 80%. For some of us, we're a little bit less, right? We've already used up that much. But we're also looking forward to Fridays. So I'll open it up and I'll have folk, if you wish to share some of your happy news, please unmute yourself, use the chat. This is a way for us to celebrate things that are going on in our lives and something that hopefully you'll be able to share with the crew. And by crew, I mean folk that we're here, right? I'm keeping it intimate since it's just here with the Project Nos Familia. So I'll share a little bit of my happy news to kick it off. I was actually running a little, like I said, low on fuel this morning, and I stopped by. We just got a new office space, so we're on campus now. We were off campus, and I figured out that there was a little like store downstairs, and I was able to get a Monster. So no promotion and no recording. They're not sponsoring Project Mills, but that was something that helped me get some energy real quick. So that's my happy news, something that I wish to share with y'all. Anybody else wish to unmute themselves and share something? It could be as small as what I just shared, or it could be as huge. So we've had folks say that they just bought a house, which with this market right now, kudos to you. But anybody wish to unmute and share any happy news, please do so. I see that someone said that they got their second dose. Yes. Dr. Campos, thank you for that. Hopefully soon, right? We need to reach out to them. Hopefully they don't make me do some stunts or something, because I know Monster's sponsorship is a little interesting. Anyone else wish to share any news? Please unmute yourself at this moment.
Please don't.
I can share, Rod.
Yes.
So I have been on like this whole self-help, self-care journey, which has been one of those hardest things to do for me during this pandemic. So I did my personal best walking yesterday, and I'm so glad to take this journey with my best friend. We're both trying to outdo each other in walking and doing self-care. So that's the happy news I have. Little steps.
Well, we'll applaud to that. And hopefully if y'all have any other happy news, please put them on the chat. Please let us know. We're always, if it comes to you mid-presentation, please go ahead and stop us. We would always like to celebrate any happy news that are going on. And this is how we do it in a formal way to realize that at times we may be feeling a little low. We might not be feeling ourselves, but there's always something to celebrate. And this is something that we do as a check-in with our staff, and like I mentioned, with our Project Nos Familia. So as y'all are part of this conversation with us today, I'd like to officially welcome y'all to the Project Nos Familia, and hopefully thank y'all for sharing some of the happy news, and hopefully you feel like it's a space where you can share some of the happy news as we go on. Now I'm gonna transition it back to Dr. Campos, who's gonna give us a little bit more of context, some of the data. He wouldn't be a professor if he didn't do his thing. So I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Campos.
Thank you, Rod. Yes, especially in these days of COVID-19, I think it's so critical to check in with ourselves, our staff, faculty, students. And so, we've had to kind of elevate that check-in exercise, and that happy news is a way to kind of do that, because we've had to deliver mentoring virtually, and the guys are going to share a little bit about what that's like. And I think it's so critical to do that activity at the very beginning. I mentioned before, it's about centering the students in that space. And we might spend, as Rod can attest to this, and Chris, is that we might spend the whole mentoring session just talking about the information that they share with us, right? It might turn into a teaching moment. Before we even get to the activity that we have planned, we might spend all that time just kind of focused on their sharing of happy news and acknowledging their accomplishments that they've done, right? Because a lot of times these young men don't get acknowledged for that. In fact, you just get targeted as problem students. And so as Rod said, the next couple of slides, I'm gonna focus on, I'm gonna share a couple of data points. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on that, but a lot of folks sometimes will get this question: why focus on men, boys, and men of color? Why aren't you focusing on, other males or all men or all students, right? You probably heard that before. And so one of the ways that we kind of address that is through this, through sharing of data, right? And as you can see here, this is a data slide that was shared, and kind of demonstrates high school completion rates. And as you can see, this is data that compares 2010 high school completion rates with 2020 high school completion rates. And so you see white, Hispanic, Latinx males, as we like to call them, Black, Asian. And over that 10-year period, what you notice here is there's been a percent difference and a drop in percent difference from those high school completion rates, except for Latinos, right? And so you see there that we actually increase those high school completion rates from 31 to 34. That's a 2.7% increase. So clearly we're trending upwards. But of course, 32.4% is not necessarily a lot to celebrate, right? We still have a lot of work to do. We still have to deal with these high school completion rates, right? Which is dismally low. And so work needs to be done, obviously, with all male populations, but of course, our focus is on Latinx males. And so our work is to address those low high school completion rates. And so that's one data point we wanted to share with you that was shared earlier today. I'm sure, Mona, you recognize that graph that Dr. Juan created. And by the way, I wanted to mention that the source of this is from a research digest that we just completed, right? It was co-authored by Dr. Juan and a number of other research staff that created these research digests. And that's part of the work that we do at Project Males through our research institute, is to produce publications like this, right? And to take data that's out there, package it into digestible form. And we've created these research digests that I'll share a little bit more about here in a moment. But again, this is data from that analysis that Dr. Juan did. Another data point that we wanted to share with you is post-secondary attainment rates, right? And as you can see, there's a couple of numbers I wanted to draw your attention to. Number one, how many of our Hispanic or Latinx males have earned post-secondary credentials, or in this case, bachelor's and graduate degrees? And as you can see, if you add up those numbers, in 2020, 10.8 and 4% post, those are graduate degrees, and 10.8 bachelor degrees. That's 15% of our Latinx males that are earning degrees. Again, a very low number. We need to do a better job of getting our young men not only into college, but out at the other end, right? With at a minimum BA degrees. Although, in the work that we do, we talk about post-secondary credentials, right? So it's important to get some kind of higher ed credential in your CV, whether that's associate's degree, bachelor's degree, even a certificate. We know that having even minimally a certificate can make a difference in terms of your salary and those kinds of things. Another number that Dr. Juan pointed out earlier today in our webinar was that some college no degree, right? You see that 16% of our young men actually dropped out or were pushed out, right? We have to be careful about using deficit language, but in this case, what did the institutions fail to do that allowed our young men to leave, right, without finishing their associate's degree or BA, right? So that's kind of low-hanging fruit. Let's go after those young men that have left college and see what it is that we can do to support them to get them to come back. And so that's another number that I wanted to kind of draw your attention to. But so those are national level data. What's happening in Texas? Well, not much difference, as you can see here. This is data that we gather from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. This is 8th grade cohorts tracked through higher education beginning in 2009, 11 years later. And what do you see here? Well, all male 8th graders out of those 100 that started in 8th grade, 48 enrolled within 48% enrolled within 11 years, and then 18 graduated. Now compare that to the other numbers, right? Latino males, out of 100 entering, 41 enrolled, and only 14 actually earned post-secondary credentials. And again, that includes certificates and associate's degrees, bachelor's. Black males doing more poorly, 11%, and then white males at 26%. So you can see in Texas, we also have our challenges, and that's the work that our Texas Ed Consortium is focused on, is on the Texas context. And so we're hoping to address those low numbers and increase the graduation rates of our young men. So another way that we talk about the work that we do is, what are the stories that are being told about our young men? What are the narratives? How are these challenges that they're facing in K-12 and higher ed? How are they talked about? And you probably are familiar with some of these terms, some of these concepts: male crisis, at risk, culturally damaged, don't care about education. Their parents don't care about education. They need to be saved. Deviant behavior, we have to modify them to some form of respectability. And what's that norm that we talk about when we talk about respectability? Of course, those are white European norms. And so we have to be careful about pathologizing the young men that we work with in terms of the research, in terms of the media, how they're framed within the schools, right? And so we talk about these narratives as deficit narratives, right? And so we are always vigilant about making sure that we don't fall into that deficit framing, because those lead to deficit solutions, right? And we're talking about addressing these problems at the systemic, structural, institutional level. And the only way you can do that is to talk about them in terms of asset or strength-based approaches. And that's really the work that we do at Project Males, is the framing, the research, the programs are all within the lens of an asset or strength-based approach. And then this last slide relating to narratives and data and setting the context. So what's really happening to our young men? What is actually happening? And again, some of you are familiar with the institutional challenges and what these young men are subject to when they're in the schools, beginning with under-resourced schools, novice teachers, leadership turnover, systemic inequalities. If any of you are familiar with Austin, the racial geography of Austin, all you got to do is step into some schools in East Austin and step into schools in West Austin and see the difference right in front of you, physical manifestations of those differences of having under-resourced schools in East Austin versus in West Austin. You have computer labs, and you don't have the turnover that you see in East Austin with leadership and teachers. And the neighborhoods as well, although in East Austin, if you've been in East Austin anytime recently, you'll see that even East Austin is changing, right? Through processes of gentrification. And so you'll see houses that are owned by Black and brown families right next to these McMansions or condos that are shooting up all over East Austin, right? Because that's right on the other side of 35. And the developers are eyeing that community, right? And our folks are being pushed out to surrounding communities like Del Valley and Manor. And that's why we're moving out to those spaces as well. Another thing we see is overrepresentation in special ed. I'm sure some of you are familiar with some of that data. Our young men are being tracked into special ed. Many of you are familiar with the school to prison pipeline, that concept, right? And so our young men are pushed out to the alternative learning center, which is one step away from the detention centers. We have Gardner Betts here, and we have too many of our young men are ending up along that pathway, right? And so at Project Males, we try to address that on the front end, but also we try to address it on the back. And so when they're at ALC or at Gardner Betts, we want to work with them to get them back into the schools. And then, of course, last but not least, everybody knows about the challenges that we face with our teacher ranks, right? Black and brown males. I'm sure that you can probably count on your hand how many Black or brown male teachers you had. I had maybe one course, I'm a little bit older. I had maybe one or two male teachers, no Black, one Latino in my entire experience at K-12. And then, you know, that didn't change too much in college, only because I was taking ethnic studies classes, right? And then there you see our representation. Disparate learning styles is another challenge that we address as well. So let's talk now about what we're doing about this, right? You know, with all the data that we presented and the stories that are being told about our young men and our asset-based approaches. So what are we doing at Project Mills about this? Now, I've kind of referenced the 3 initiatives that we're a part of, right? That we oversee: the Texas Ed Consortia for Male Students of Color. Of course, Mona is very familiar with that consortium. She's been an advisory council member of ours for many, many years, representing San Antonio College. And we convene our 30-member consortia partners at institutes. These are spring and fall institutes. These are professional development spaces. And then we also convene them at our summit, our annual summit, which is a signature event, which we hold in August. And that's for the young men that our consortia partners serve, right, through some kind of minority male initiative. And we bring them together, and it's a powerful space for 2 days that we occupy the Student Activity Center. And we have 2 days of workshops and keynotes, and we have spoken word. We have a student panel that Rod and I moderate, and that's the consortia work. We founded that in 2013, and then we moved into a membership kind of arrangement about 4 years ago. And that's a way to kind of you maintain and sustain this work. Our research institute, I've referenced a number of times, again, made up of 2 research teams at UT and Texas A&M, and also a 50-member network of faculty research affiliates, right? We've grown that affiliate network from a handful to now 50. And that's part of the research that we do, the publications, the research digest. And then, of course, the mentoring program, which I won't say much about because Rod and Chris are going to step in here, and you're going to get to listen to them and talk a little bit about the mentoring program. And they've got some activities planned as well for you. So you won't just be listening to a bunch of talking heads. We're going to actually have you engage in some activities. So Rod, Chris, I'm going to let you guys take over.
Thank you, Dr. Campos. So I'll be talking a little bit more about our heart and soul, the Project Mills Student Mentoring Program. This is where the rubber meets the road and where we're at in the community. So this program really began in 2011. We're celebrating, like Dr. Campos mentioned, our 10 years of working with youth. Legend has it that it began at one school with Dr. Science, a graduate student, and a handful of undergraduate students. Currently, right now, we're working with over 70 UT students. These are all students that our work has transitioned to virtual. So we'll be talking a little bit more about our virtual programming, how we support our students as we're mentoring close to 300 young men. And these are all at the schools we're working with here in Austin. If y'all familiar with the region, our focus is really on the schools that are on the east side, like Dr. Campos mentioned, because of what's going on with these communities. Some of them I know are in between that 35 divide, but our goal is to help those students that are part of schools that have been historically underserved. Our mentoring sessions, even through virtualness, have continued to be between 30 minutes to an hour. We know that in person, after an hour, that's where it starts to not be as conducive. So we want it to be something that we can go in, talk to them about our curriculum, and then leave them with a positive impression for that week and continue the conversation the following week. As we know, with everything that's going on, and I know that some of y'all have participated in multiple Zoom calls even today or throughout the week, that's been a challenge as well. So we try to keep it between that 30-40 minute mark because we know that our students are going through some of those challenges of Zoom fatigue and Zoom burnout. Our model has still stayed the same as far as near peers. Some of our undergraduate students that just joined our Project Mills this year, they're only a couple of months, if so a year, away from being the age of some of the students that we're mentoring at the school side. So our goal is to mentor them throughout their trajectory. And I'll share a little bit more about our intergenerational model as we go on. But this is a way for us to connect them, have them share their similar experiences since they're so similar in age, and they can serve as role models to build that team, that group dynamic, so that trust is formed and we're able to have these conversations that are often revolving around, for those of you that are in education and understand some of these these frameworks that we're using critical mentoring, which is something that was coined by Dr. Tori Weinstein. There's a book called Critical Mentoring. If this is one of the tools that you wish to incorporate in your practice, we highly recommend. It's sold online, and you could probably find a PDF version, or we can send it to you if you reach out to us. This is one of the big foundations of our work, and I'll talk a little bit more about the frameworks in a minute. We incorporate a lot of the practices and frameworks that are being done at the school sites already with the school districts. We do not wish to reinvent the wheel. We know that a lot of the practices are based on social and emotional learning and restorative practices. And these are things that have been implemented or have begun to be implemented, depending on which schools we're discussing. But this is something that we wish to replicate through our services as well, so that these students have that connection with some of the practices that are going on. And then that's why we're able to deliver our curriculum. These are activities that are run by our graduate and undergraduate mentors, which we train through retreats. These are oftentimes events when we would do them in person. We would share food, break bread. It's really a way to connect our undergraduate mentors and build that familia within. This is something that has translated to virtual. We're missing some of the key features. We know that with undergraduate students, and even with some of our graduates, and even me, I'll say, food is where you really get them and you get us. So if you say food, I'm there. That's something that we haven't been able to quite yet figure out. So if you know of a way to get food to 70 folk at the same time, we would appreciate it. But we know that breaking bread is one of the best ways that we know as a community to connect with our people, and it's also to give back, right? Oftentimes we try to provide some incentivizing meals, and that's where we're able to celebrate as a community as we begin the semesters, and also as we close with some of our celebratory retreats. We have the Impact course, which is a 1-hour course that serves to train our students in the latest research that is happening on men of color, that serves to train them on the latest mentoring practices. This is where we bring in our community leaders as a part of our monthly pláticas. And lastly, this is a way for them to train and connect and get college credit for the time that they are spending connecting with our graduate mentors. So for us, this is a way for them to earn college credit and take the learning to the course through service learning. Lastly, we have the Project Mill Student Org, which is a student organization that all of our students are part of. And this is a way for them to socialize. I know that from the Student Org, we've had students who have developed other organizations together. They've developed socials. They've gone out and become roommates. They become friends. So it's another way for our undergraduate students to connect, build that community here at UT Austin, and to empower them within their own group of peers to be serving as peer mentors for themselves as well. We'll share that y'all see the excelencia and recognition. So we're proud to say that we were recognized in 2020. I'm lying to you, 2019. It's been a year. So 2019, for the work that we're doing, that showcased that mentors that were part of our program had a 90% chance to graduate or be on track to graduate. So this is what we're talking about we're building community with our mentors who are not only mentoring at the K-12 level, but being mentored themselves, which we'll share a little bit more as I'm framing it. For those of you that are visuals, this is our intergenerational mentoring model. So we've talked a little bit about on the ground. These are some of the activities that we've done with our students. These are some of the boys that we originally think that are being the mentees. However, through our approach, our mentors are also being mentored as mentees. They are also students. For the most part, a lot of our students are of the same backgrounds as our promising first-gen students at the K-12 level. So a lot of our undergraduate mentors are first generation. They identify as low SES. They may identify with other marginalized identities that we're there to support as they're working towards their degree here at UT Austin. I will say that we have a cultural match that stems not only from our mentors in the undergraduate sector of our intergenerational model, but also with our graduate students. So I'll speak to part of the research that we've been conducting recently with our graduate students. And we found that since 2011, we've had 17 master students that have gone through the pipeline. We've had a 95% completion rate of them attaining their master's degree while they're serving with the undergraduate students at the school sites. And these are oftentimes students that also identify as first gen, coming from marginalized backgrounds, and they're also here to be supported by our staff and faculty. I will say that I also identify as a first generation student and first generation staff. I do not come from a a family of program coordinators or UT faculty. So this is also an opportunity for me to get that support that we need, right? So support comes from the top all the way to the bottom. And this is something that we're proud to share here with the overall view of the Project Nos Familia through our intergenerational model. I know I hinted a little bit at some of the frameworks that we're using at the school sites. This is something that we've been really working on, trying to translate our curriculum to the virtual platform. We're using Zoom, and this is something that it's not the same, right? If you're talking about restorative practices and sitting in a circle and having a talking piece and having everybody share a story, it doesn't translate as well via Zoom, partly because sometimes there's issues of connectivity, there's issues of even I have to be at the office sometimes because the Wi-Fi at home isn't working. So that's something that we struggle and we know of. But through Zoom, we're able to integrate some of it, right? Like Zoom forces us to have one person speaking at a time. It's kind of hard to have multiple people speaking at a time. So Zoom allows for some of those practices that are traditional restorative practices to have one person speak and then the group listen. And that's a way where we popcorn or call out. So it serves as sort of like a talking piece in the virtual setting. So we've been intentional about implementing some of those small practices into our virtual setting. Social emotional learning, some of y'all are familiar and understand the Cassell wheel and some of the practices within. So I won't go too much into it, but little things, right? As far as our check-ins with our happy news, this is a way to engage or gauge the emotional well-being of our students. Sometimes, like Dr. Campos said, we might just be on a Zoom call, checking in, seeing how our staff is doing, and then work on some of the business side later. With our mentors, we might just have a whole session just checking in on them, right? So it's checking in on their emotional well-being, which doesn't change from when we were on the ground to when we were on a Zoom call. The critical mentoring piece is one of the frameworks that, like I mentioned, we really rely on. And this is always putting students first, their identities first, understanding some of the challenges that they're working with and how they're being successful in navigating them. How do we use some of their assets to create these conversations? And how do we use some of the assets that our mentors are having as people that they can relate with to develop each other? This is where I shared with you an intergenerational model, and I know it comes in a form of a hierarchical framework, right? In a hierarchical model. But in reality, our students and our mentors and our mentees are learning from each other. And this is where it becomes even, right? So from a mentoring relationship with us and through the critical mentoring, we want our mentors to learn as much from our mentees and our mentees to also learn as much from our mentors. As we go on, we're going to share a little bit, a quick, just what we've learned throughout the years and opportunities for us that we've shown and seen to empower our mentors. Yes, those are some of our students. All of them actually graduated. I don't know about the puppy. I don't know if he graduated yet, but some of our folk, I know that Karen is graduated. She was in education. Fausto is actually graduating, and he's an engineer. Fausto's the one on the top left. He's an engineer in Houston. He just bought his first house, so he's making a lot more money than I am. Juan in the middle, he graduated with a degree in political science and Chicano studies, and he's actually an entrepreneur. And then on the right, we have Robert, who just graduated last year with a degree in physics. And I think he's working for Applied Materials. So I think I can't even do physics or numbers, but these are all of some of our students that have graduated and have shown to like I mentioned prior, those 90% of our students being on track to graduate. That's who some of the faces of those students, right? So we can show you the metrics, but we also love to show you some of the faces. Like I mentioned, I don't know if the puppies graduated, but that's one of our, for the time being, that was how we were tabling. And of course, puppies attract students, and that's how we're using it as a tabling technique. There's no framework that I would tell you that's part of, so there's no literature-based practice on that, but puppies work if you're trying to recruit students.
We know anecdotally it works, right?
Yes, so so one of the things that we've learned throughout the years, that being part of the mentoring program increases the sense of belonging, especially for our new mentors. Oftentimes these students are looking for a place to fit in. As you know, they might be the ones that are more inclined to be at a tabling event or just trying to find their community. So for us, being part of this has shown to increase their sense of belonging. Once they're here, once they're on their third or fourth year, they know they belong. We've talked to them about it. They've read the research, and then they know what to expect and how they can be of support to others. understanding some of their external factors so that we know that as mentors, yes, they're tabling, they're having fun, they're being out there, but they got the responsibilities, not only tending to the puppy, but they might after this go out to their next class, go out to their next job. I could tell you for the fact that most of these students were interning with us, but we're also working a part-time job, maybe having external responsibilities at home. So these are all things that we need to understand as we're working with. As administrators, we might be inclined to question why they're not there, and it might be easy for us to apply a punitive response, but it's important to understand that there's other things that are going on in their life, and if they can't mentor, it's an opportunity for us to step in and see how we can help them out. So be that space outside of their multiple responsibilities. Like I said, a lot of our students right now, they're the frontline workers. They're the ones who are working at HEB. They're the ones who are interacting with folk in the service industry. So be that space to vent, to share that space where they can talk about what's going on in their lives. We know that it's stressful, right? I can't imagine being a frontline worker at HEB. So that's one of those things that we need to be that space where they can talk to their community and share some of those shared experiences with other students that are going through the same thing so that they don't feel like they're going through it alone. Lastly, like I mentioned, showing grace. Know that showing grace was something that we talked a lot in the beginning of COVID when we were trying to understand how to log into Zoom, how to, can you hear me, see our connectivity, and something that we wish to continue to express, right? We haven't left the scenario quite yet. We're still in the midst of everything. So continuing to show grace has been something that we've been using in person, right? We're not a punitive program, like I mentioned. We're not here to punish our students because they can't go. On the contrary, these are just opportunities for us to understand how we can support them. So showing grace and extending it even through our Zoom. And then preparing for the future of mentoring, right? We honestly have been discussing as a staff and as a team, and we've tried to gauge their voices on what mentoring looks like for next semester, right? So this is a way for us to bring them into the conversation, have them share how they would feel to continue to engaging with students, to continue to engaging with themselves. So having that student voice is very important as we ourselves are trying to see what school districts are doing, what the university is doing. So incorporating their student voice so that whenever we create our program, we continue to have them in mind as they are the ones that are on the front lines working with our students. For our some of our recommendations when working with our boys and young men at the school sites, we'll share some of the practices that we've learned. We'd also like to highlight that Victor Herrera is actually, we interviewed him last week. Victor Herrera is on his second year as a civil engineer at UTSA. So Mona, we sent some folk out there. We have that Austin, San Antonio pipeline. So he's out there working on his degree, and we will share some of his quotes on our 10-year celebration as you'll have an opportunity to hear from him. One of the things that we've learned from the last 10 years of mentoring is that consistency and commitment is very important, especially virtually. I'll share two stories real quick, if I may. I know that we might be possibly running out of time, but we were mentoring virtually. There was one time this last summer where some of our grad students said that they couldn't go. We were having a constant amount of students attending the Zoom calls. Because we weren't able to go, there was a conflict with some of the holidays or some of the scheduling between the district and the university. We couldn't attend, the Zoom call didn't happen, and then the amount of students that we got really declined the following week, right? So we learned that at times in person, students know that they would know that we couldn't go because of X, Y, and Z. On Zoom, and now it's really the importance to be consistent, or else students think that it's just a complete drop-off. So that's not the case. The importance of check-ins, honestly, if you have a curriculum and students haven't been checked in emotionally, it's really difficult. I can't talk to you about college development or identity development if I haven't checked in with you first. So even now with virtual and online, check-ins are as important as can be, right? As the curriculum in itself. Lastly, understanding their external factors as well. We've known with some of our students that unfortunately, their living room is their master bedroom with everything that's going on. It's also their classroom. It's also the kitchen. So it's understanding that they're trying their best to connect with you for a virtual mentoring session. And they just got out of class that was a 2-hour Zoom call, which even a 45-minute Zoom call is kind of stressful for us as an adult or as adults. So imagining for them, and then they're taking 8 hours of Zoom classes throughout the day. So understanding some of those challenges that they're facing. With that said, don't let the mentoring be just another part of the classroom, right? Provide that social interaction for them. They might not be hanging out with their friends. This might be the only time they can discuss some of their feelings. So that's why it's very important to create these social interactions with the check-ins on this virtual platform. Lastly, be fun, right? Be engaging. We oftentimes, it's difficult to sit in, like I said, in a Zoom call and understand what's going on. So being as fun, as engaging as possible. So with that said, I think we're going to transition in a bit, and I'll have Chris run a little activity for y'all so that y'all are able to engage. Some of the ways that we've tried to utilize some of our platforms, utilize some of our new technologies so that we're able to engage. So hopefully y'all feel okay being part of the Project Meals Familia. We would like to welcome you all as mentees. So if you can just for a quick second, think back. I know for me, it was just a couple of months since I was in high school. So just think about being back in high school, and I'll let Chris take it away.
Hey everybody, yeah, thanks for letting us come and present to y'all. So yeah, you are all taking on the role as a mentee, which is, you will be one of our Project Meals mentees for the day. We would like to run through one of our activities that we have moved virtual. And so to kind of still emulate some of these mentor-mentee matching and some of the qualities that we want our mentees to feel like they have choice in who their mentor is and how we find connections and bonding through mentees and mentors. So in person, we may do a speed mentoring or some other type of connection building. But for right now, we're gonna do a Would You Rather mentorship qualities edition activity. And so I'll ask a series of questions to y'all about what are the qualities that you look for in a mentee, in a mentor. And so you can, it'll be a Would You Rather. So if y'all have access to those reactions that you have there, then you're gonna put either a heart for the first option or a surprised face for the second, and we'll kind of work through this. So yeah, I already see some participation. Would you rather have a mentor with the same interest as you, put a heart, or different interest than you, put a surprise face? I see Mona put the surprise face, and with the heart, yeah, personally, I would like the same interests. And so, yeah, heart, interest, and right, these are individual and so very different for each of us. So next question, would you rather have a mentor with the same background as you, put a heart, or a different background than you? And this is broadly speaking, because so this could be anything. So heart for the same background, or a surprise face for a different background. I see some hearts in there. Surprise face too. Yeah, so that's our identity and our background. So those may be more salient to have the same, or you're interested in looking for new ones. Next one, Rod. Would you rather have a mentor who is all about sports, put a heart, or would you rather have a mentor who knows more about pop culture, put a surprise face? Awesome, see some surprise faces in there. Too many sports fans on the call. Oh, a heart too. Next one, Rod. Would you rather have a mentor who is older than you, or the same age as you? So heart for this, for older than you, and then surprise face for the same age as you. Awesome. Well, again, mixed batch, mixed batch. I think we have one or two more. Would you rather have a mentor who has the job you want, or one that you've never heard of? So heart for the job you want, surprise face for a job you've never heard of. Cool. Again, mixed. So we got a few folks with the job that you want, which is always great to have mentorship in, and some jobs that you've never heard of, right? to expose you to those. Next one. And I think this is our last question, but would you rather join Project Males as the Familia or join Project Males? And so, or surprise face. I appreciate all of those reactions and everything. Thank you for being such a great participatory audience. And I hope that you get a little bit of the insight on what it's like to try to engage and try to have high energy and engage our mentees and try to find those qualities that we want.
Thank you, Chris. So we're glad that y'all were able to engage in that activity, and that you're, whether you put a heart or a surprise face, you're willing to join us in Project Mills. We're going to share a little bit about some of the programs or programming that we'll be having for the summer, up to the summer. So if you wish to join us, we'll share about that in a minute. With that, we'd like to thank you for your time. And then before we close out and share those opportunities, give you an opportunity to ask us any questions, or if we can provide any answers that we did not provide in the chat. So please feel free to, if any questions, unmute yourself. You don't have to turn on your camera. If you do, that'd be great, right? We tell our students to turn on their camera, but it's up to y'all. We're glad to answer any questions you may have.
I have a quick question, Rodrigo.
Yes.
So I know part of your presentation, talked about the difference between in-person as well as Zoom. What have y'all been noticing, or what do you think you would want to keep post-pandemic? Because Zoom does have a few benefits that I have seen, but I'm struggling with, are we going to continue using it? I would prefer we do, but what is y'all's approach to that? Because now we have a technology that we just all were forced to learn and do. And there's got to be some positivity around being able to do our work via this virtual space. But what are y'all feeling about, being able to connect, not 100%, but just having the option to do this? What has been y'all's experience, and what is y'all's thinking and idea? What are you keeping post-pandemic?
Yeah, so we were, I guess, forced to learn Zoom, right? We're all on Zooms together. One of the things that we've decided as a staff that we're gonna continue is I'm gonna go from the programmatic top down, right? So a lot of our staff meetings are gonna continue to be on Zoom. Chris has been mentoring one of the possibilities, right? Chris is actually in LA. So Chris has been working with our students, mentoring students all the way from California. So that's something that we were always limited and bounded by the region, right? From being in Austin, we could go to schools that were only up to 20, 25 miles away. So that's been one of the things that we've continued as a staff. We want to continue to meet via Zoom. We're able to provide some of the larger scale programming via Zoom. So that's something that as a collective for that end, we're going to continue. With our young men, we've been outreached from by different districts. We're actually looking to possibly work in San Antonio, working with San Marcos ISD, as some of the school partners, which we were always bounded by. Maybe if you're familiar with the Austin, I don't know how many folk are specifically Austin on the call, but that Stasny line south was kind of like the mark of being too south, and Del Valle was as far as we've been east. So for some of these schools, they're willing to continue to have their students connect with us virtually. So we've been thinking about continuing to have mentoring sites and expand because of Zooms. So we've been thinking about having maybe a graduate student just specifically dedicated to run that virtual mentoring. So that's been one of the conversations that we have been wanting to continue to implement. The other thing is that we don't know if we're necessarily out of the woods yet, right? Some schools have talked about possibly doing a hybrid, possibly having students all meet in person and then having us continue to be Zoom, because they're not allowing external partners to be on campus yet. So we honestly don't know if that's going to be a full transition, right? So we may be forced to continue to mentor through Zoom during the fall. So I don't know if that answered your question, Mona, but we're still trying to implement it, and it's been difficult. There's been some challenges. We've all experienced that Zoom burnout. It feels like, and I don't know for y'all that are doing your programming, it feels that we have to get on people's calendar even quicker because people's schedules fill up a lot faster. If you're trying to do something, set up a meeting for the next week, it takes now 2 to 3 weeks to set up that. So it's one of those challenges that, and then at the school side, we've seen that a lot of our admins are overwhelmed with everything that's going on. Even now that they're being forced to have the state exam in person, and that's been something that pulled some of our programming out and back and forth. So there's a lot more challenges, but Zoom has been, I guess, a bit of a platform that we found to be reliable and hopefully serve us in the future still, as we continue to think about transitioning back in person.
Thank you. I had a question. First of all, thank you. It's a wonderful presentation. I learned a lot, even though I thought I was on top of things. I was wondering about the credit that you grant for students, college credit you mentioned. Is that for the training sessions or the retreat, or is it for the year? How does it work? And you also mentioned that it's under COLA. I didn't know what that was.
Yes, so COLA is the College of Liberal Arts. This is a 1-hour course that students are required to take a course because of the programming. It doesn't directly count towards the degree in itself, but they're able to petition it. We've had students who are in the cusp of graduating, but they need a service learning component, and they petitioned our class for that. It's a closed course, so it's only for our mentors, and it's only promoted that way. And this course is an opportunity for us, like I mentioned on the intergenerational pipeline, for our master's students to get that training to teach their class, to create to develop the curriculum. Chris can share about his experiences, and think about the possibility of becoming, I know y'all shared the PhD track on the chat, to become that professor and have that college university experience. But for our students, it's for them as a team. And if you're part of a mentoring program, you'll oftentimes have that weekly check-in or that bi-weekly check-in or that monthly check-in. So for us, it's a continuous training. And for their check-ins, they'll get an hour credit. And it's an hour in the fall, and then it's an hour in the spring of credit. In the fall, our curriculum covers some of the challenges that are happening to our boys and young men in the K-12 level. And then in the spring, it focuses on higher ed. So
it's not for the high school students or the junior high students, only for the university ones.
Only for our UT students that are mentors, yes.
I know. I wonder because at one point the Division of Diversity and Community Engagement was working with us to be able to grant credit through the service learning. So I don't know if any progress had been made regarding that. So thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, Emmett, go ahead.
No, yeah, Maria, we'd be happy to chat to find out the status of that.
Right.
But yeah, for right now, it's 1 credit for undergrads. We pull our students from advisory classes in the high schools and middle schools, and that's how we work with the young men. So we don't want to disrupt their core classes.
Right. Excellent. Well, thank you.
Okay, I wanted to say thank you so much. I've got
Say hi.
Sorry. So I wanted to say thank you so much. We really admire the work that you do and just appreciate the chance to learn from y'all. And as you celebrate 10 years, best of luck and best wishes for that. And so that is our webinar. We're up at 4. So thank you all for attending. And, to Emmett, Rodrigo, and Christopher, thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for inviting us. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.